The courtroom was so silent you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. On one side sat Jessica Thorne, the mistress who had successfully stolen a husband, a multi-million-dollar company, and a family home. She was smiling, actually smirking, at the woman she had destroyed. That woman, Elisa Vance, was trembling, clutching a tissue, looking like she was about to faint. Everyone thought it was over. Everyone thought the mistress had won. But Judge Harrison hadn't seen Exhibit C yet. No one knew that a tiny, forgotten device had been recording the entire time, and when that audio played, the smile didn't just fade, it vanished, and what happened next sent paramedics rushing through the double doors. This is the story of the smile that disappeared. Elisa Vance adjusted the rearview mirror of her Audi Q7, glancing at her husband, Mason, in the passenger seat. It was a rainy Tuesday in Seattle, the kind of grey, weeping weather that seemed to soak into your bones. They were driving home from a charity gala, where Mason had been the center of attention. As the CFO of Vance Architecture, the firm Elisa had founded with her inheritance, and blood, sweat, and tears 10 years ago, Mason was charming, handsome, and impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit. Elisa felt a surge of pride. They were the power couple of the Pacific Northwest. 10 years of marriage, a thriving business, and they were finally talking about having children. "Great speech tonight, honey," Elisa said, turning onto the highway. "The investors were eating out of your hand." Mason didn't look up from his phone. "They like confidence, Elle. You seemed a bit jittery. Did you drink too much champagne?" Elisa frowned. She had nursed a single glass of sparkling water all night. "I didn't drink anything, Mason. I was driving." "Right. Sure." He tapped away on his screen, a small smile playing on his lips. Suddenly, the car's infotainment system, which was connected to Mason's iPhone via Bluetooth, chimed. The music, a soft jazz playlist, cut out. A text message notification popped up on the large dashboard screen. Usually, Mason was careful. He was paranoid about his privacy. But tonight, perhaps emboldened by the alcohol or the success of the gala, he had forgotten to disconnect. The message was 5 words. It hung on the glowing screen like a neon sign in the dark car. Sender: Jessica, HR. Message: "Did you tell the bitch yet?" Elisa's foot instinctively lifted off the gas pedal. The car slowed. "What is that?" Elisa asked, her voice trembling. Mason lunged for the dashboard, his composure cracking for a split second. He tapped the dismiss button frantically. Nothing. Just office banter. Jessica has a dark sense of humor. "Jessica from HR calls your wife a bitch?" Elisa's heart was hammering against her ribs. "And what are you supposed to tell me?" Mason sighed, the charm vanishing instantly. His face hardened into a look of utter boredom. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed that he had to deal with this earlier than planned. "Pull over, Elisa." "What?" "Pull over, now." Elisa steered the car onto the shoulder of the wet highway, the hazard lights clicking rhythmically. She turned to look at the man she had loved for a decade. He looked like a stranger. "I wasn't going to do this in the car," Mason said, checking his cuticles. "But since you're snooping—" "Yes, I'm seeing Jessica. We're in love. Real love, Elisa. Not this business partnership masquerading as a marriage we have." Elisa felt the air leave her lungs. "Jessica? The intern we hired 6 months ago? She's 24, Mason. I built this life with you." "You built a cage," Mason spat. "And I'm done. I want a divorce. And before you start screaming, you should know. I've already spoken to the lawyers. The firm, the house. It's all going to get very complicated for you if you don't cooperate." "Cooperate?" Elisa laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "I started that company before I met you. You're the CFO, not the owner. Mason turned to her, his eyes cold and dead. Check the bylaws we updated last year, Elle. The ones you signed without reading because you trusted me. I have majority voting rights on the board now. Jessica is practically family already. If you fight me, I will burn your reputation to the ground. I know about the pills, Elisa. Elisa froze. She took mild anti-anxiety medication, prescribed by her doctor after her mother died. That's private medical information. It's leverage, Mason smiled. Now drive me home. I have packing to do. I'm staying at the Four Seasons tonight. Jessica is waiting. 3 weeks later, Elisa's life had dissolved into a nightmare. Mason hadn't just left. He had launched a Scorched Earth campaign. Elisa sat in the office of Sarah Miller, a shark of a divorce attorney known for eating narcissists for breakfast. But even Sarah looked grim as she reviewed the paperwork piled on her mahogany desk. "This is bad, Elisa," Sarah said, taking off her glasses. "He's not just filing for divorce. He's filed for an emergency restraining order against you, claiming domestic violence." "Violence?" Elisa shrieked, standing up. "I have never touched him. He's 6'2". I'm 5'4". He claims that on the night of the gala, you attacked him in the car. He has photos of bruises on his arm." "He grabbed me," Elisa cried, tears streaming down her face. "When I tried to look at his phone, he grabbed my wrists. Those are his grip marks on me." "It's he said she said right now," Sarah cautioned. "But there's more. Jessica Thorne has filed a police report. She claims you came to the office 2 days ago and threatened to, quote, kill her unborn child." The room spun. Elisa gripped the back of the chair. "Unborn. She's pregnant, apparently, and that makes her a sympathetic victim in the eyes of the court. Mason has successfully petitioned for a temporary freeze on your joint assets to protect the child's future. They've locked you out of the company accounts, Elisa. They've changed the locks on the house." Elisa felt physically ill. She was staying in a budget motel on the outskirts of Seattle because her credit cards were declined. The millions she had earned were sitting behind a firewall constructed by her husband. "I didn't go to the office," Elisa whispered. "I haven't been there in a week. I've been in bed, depressed." "Can you prove it?" Sarah asked. "Does the motel have cameras?" I don't know. It's a cheap place. The cameras are mostly broken." Sarah sighed. "We have a preliminary hearing on Friday. Mason and Jessica will be there. They are trying to push for a summary judgment to get you to settle. They want you to sign over 70% of the company and the house in exchange for them dropping the assault charges." Friday came too quickly. The courtroom hallway was crowded. Elisa wore a simple black suit, looking pale and gaunt. She hadn't slept in days. Then, the elevator doors opened. Mason stepped out, looking radiant in a navy suit. On his arm was Jessica Thorne. Jessica was beautiful. There was no denying that. Blonde, tall, with the kind of youth that didn't need makeup. She was wearing a white dress that was modest, almost angelic, with a hand protectively resting on her barely there baby bump. When they saw Elisa, Mason whispered something to Jessica. Jessica looked at Elisa. She didn't look scared of the woman who supposedly threatened to kill her. She didn't look guilty. She smiled. It was a slow, predatory curling of the lips, a smile that said, "I have your life, and there is nothing you can do about it." As they passed Elisa, Jessica leaned in, her voice a sickly sweet whisper. "Love the suit, Elisa. Does it come in homeless?" Elisa lunged. She couldn't help it. The rage, the grief, the injustice. It all snapped. "You monster!" "Elisa, no!" Sarah Miller grabbed Elisa's arm, holding her back. But it was too late. Jessica stumbled back dramatically, letting out a loud, theatrical gasp. Help! She's trying to hurt the baby! Mason, help!" The bailiffs were there in seconds. Mason was shouting, pointing at Elisa. "See! I told you! She's unstable! She's crazy!" Elisa was pinned against the wall by a bailiff. "I didn't touch her. She whispered at me." From behind the wall of security guards, Elisa saw Jessica's face one last time before she was escorted away. Jessica was buried in Mason's chest, pretending to sob. But over Mason's shoulder, her eyes met Elisa's. The tears were fake. The fear was an act. She winked. That wink broke Elisa. As the bailiffs dragged her out of the courthouse hallway, her vision blurred. The stress of the last month, the lack of food, and the sheer cruelty of the moment were too much. Elisa's knees buckled. The world went black. The steady beep of a heart monitor was the first thing Elisa heard. It was a rhythmic, annoying sound that dragged her back from the darkness. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room. "She's waking up," a soft voice said. Elisa turned her head. Sarah Miller, her attorney, was sitting in a plastic chair next to the bed, looking more exhausted than Elisa felt. Standing next to her was a doctor, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Vance," the doctor said gently, "you had a severe syncopal episode, fainting. It was brought on by extreme stress, dehydration, and low blood sugar. You've been out for about 4 hours." Elisa tried to sit up, but her head swam. The hearing, postponed," Sarah said, her voice tight. "But not for long. Judge Harrison granted a 48-hour recess because of your medical emergency. But Elisa, it's bad." Elisa sank back into the pillow. "How bad?" Mason's lawyer used the incident in the hallway to file an emergency motion for mental incompetency, Sarah explained, rubbing her temples. "They are painting a picture of a woman who is unhinged, violent, and dangerous. They have the video of you lunging at Jessica. It's all over the local news. The headlines are calling you the jealous CEO. They're saying you tried to attack a pregnant woman." "I didn't," Elisa whispered, tears hot in her eyes. "She winked at me, Sarah. She whispered that she liked my homeless look. She baited me." "I believe you," Sarah said, leaning in. But the judge didn't see the wink. The cameras didn't catch the whisper. All they saw was you screaming and Jessica crying. Unless we can prove they are lying, conclusively, by Friday morning, you are going to lose everything. The company, the house, and likely your freedom. They're pushing for jail time for the assault." Elisa stared at the ceiling tiles. 10 years. 10 years of building Vance architecture from a basement startup to a skyscraper-designing powerhouse. She had hired Mason when he was a struggling accountant. She had bought him his suits. She had paid off his student loans. "Maybe I should just sign," Elisa said hollowly. "Let them have it. I can't do this anymore." "Elisa, don't you dare," Sarah snapped, her shark-like demeanor returning. "That is exactly what they want. Think. You are the architect. You built that world. You know things about that company, that building, and that man that no one else knows. Is there anything we can use?" Elisa closed her eyes, visualizing her office. The sleek glass walls, the mahogany desk where Mason now sat, the open-plan design she had sketched on a napkin. She thought about Mason's arrogance. He thought he controlled the environment. But he didn't understand the environment. He was a numbers guy. She was a creator. Suddenly, a memory flickered. 3 months ago, before the gala, before the text message. Mason had been complaining about the HVAC system in his office, making a humming or noise that distracted him during calls. He demanded it be fixed. Elisa, ever the perfectionist, had decided to use the opportunity to test a new prototype sensor array she was considering for a library project in Portland. It was called the Echo 3. It wasn't just a noise sensor. It was a high-fidelity acoustic diagnostic tool designed to pinpoint structural vibrations. It recorded audio constantly, buffering 30 days of data to a local solid-state drive hidden in the ceiling panel, triggered by decibel spikes or specific frequencies. She had installed it herself, disguised as a simple smoke detector vent directly above Mason's desk. "The hum," Elisa whispered. "What?" Sarah asked. Elisa sat up, ignoring the dizziness. Mason complained about a hum in his office. I installed an acoustic logger in the ceiling to diagnose it. It's a prototype. It records audio, high-definition audio. Sarah's eyes widened. "Is it still there?" "Mason is lazy," Elisa said, a cold determination settling over her. "He never looks up. He wouldn't know what it was, even if he did. He thinks it's a vent. Does it transmit to the cloud?" "No," Elisa shook her head. "Security protocol for the library client. It's a closed loop. The data is on a physical drive inside the unit." "In his office," Sarah said, the hope draining from her face. "Elisa, you have a restraining order. You can't go within 500 feet of that building. Mason has changed the security codes. There are guards." Elisa ripped the IV tape off her hand. "I designed the building, Sarah. I know ways in that aren't on the blueprints, and I know who runs the night shift." The rain in Seattle had turned into a torrential downpour by 11 p.m. The Vance Architecture building stood like a dark monolith against the skyline, a testament to Elisa's genius, now occupied by her usurpers. Elisa sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's nondescript sedan, parked 2 blocks away. She was wearing a hoodie and dark jeans. "This is insane," Sarah hissed, checking her watch. "If you get caught, I get disbarred, and you go to prison for violating a restraining order and burglary." "It's not burglary if I steal my own property from my own building," Elisa replied, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm going in." She opened the door and sprinted into the rain. She didn't go to the front entrance. Mason would have put extra security there, specifically to watch for her. Instead, she circled to the back alley, where the large waste management bins were stored. There was a service door here, usually locked and alarmed. Elisa pulled out her phone and dialed a number. It rang twice. "Hello?" A hushed, nervous voice answered. "Leo, I'm at the back," Elisa said. Leo was the head of IT. He was 26, brilliant, and fiercely loyal to Elisa, because she had given him a job when he was a college dropout with purple hair. "Elisa, man, this is risky," Leo whispered. "Jessica fired the old security chief yesterday. She brought in private contractors. These guys are goons." "I just need 5 minutes, Leo. Please, for the company." There was a pause, then the sound of a heavy latch clicking. The service door cracked open. Leo stood there, looking pale in the dim light of the hallway. He ushered her in quickly. "The cameras in this corridor are on a loop. I hacked them 10 minutes ago. But the elevator requires a biometric scan now. Mason's fingerprint only." "We're not taking the elevator," Elisa said, moving toward the stairwell. "We're walking up. 20 floors. "Jesus," Leo muttered, following her. The climb was grueling. Elisa was still weak from the hospital, her legs burning with every step, but the adrenaline kept her moving. As they climbed, Leo filled her in. "It's a bloodbath up there, Elisa. Jessica is firing anyone who asks questions. They're shredding documents. I saw an email. They're planning to sell the firm to Apex Corp as soon as the divorce is finalized." "Apex?" Elisa stopped on the 12th landing, breathless. "Apex strips companies for parts. They'll fire everyone." "Exactly. That's why I'm helping you. Mason doesn't care. He's getting a golden parachute payout." They reached the 20th floor, the executive suite. Elisa cracked the stairwell door. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the emergency exit signs. Mason's office was at the end of the hall. "The guards do a sweep every hour," Leo whispered, checking his phone. "You have 12 minutes before the next patrol." Elisa slipped off her shoes to move silently. She crept down the hallway she had walked 1,000 times in high heels. It felt alien now, hostile. She reached Mason's office door, locked. "Electronic deadbolt," Leo noted. "I can't brute force this without triggering an alarm." Elisa reached up to her hair and pulled out a bobby pin. She knelt down, not to the lock, but to the floor hinge. "I picked the hardware for these doors, Leo. High aesthetic, low security rating on the hinges. Hand me your multi-tool." It took 3 agonizing minutes to pop the pins from the bottom hinge. With a groan of effort, they wedged the heavy glass door open, just enough for Elisa to squeeze through. Inside, the office smelled of Mason's cologne and cheap perfume. Jessica's. Elisa wasted no time. She dragged Mason's ergonomic chair to the center of the room and climbed up. "Hurry!" Leo hissed from the hallway. "I hear the elevator." Elisa's fingers fumbled with the ceiling tile. It was a sleek, acoustic foam panel. She pried it loose. There it was, the Echo 3 unit, a small black box with a blinking green LED. Still recording. She didn't try to extract the data there. She ripped the Velcro, mounting off the subframe, disconnecting the power wire. The green light died. She shoved the device into her hoodie pocket. "They're coming!" Leo's voice was a panicked squeak. Elisa jumped down from the chair. She shoved it back to its approximate position. "We can't go back to the stairs," Leo whispered. "They're coming from that direction." "The server room," Elisa pointed. "It has a false floor for the cabling. We can hide underneath." They scrambled into the adjacent server room, just as the heavy footsteps of the security guards echoed in the hallway. "Did you hear something?" a gruff voice asked. "Probably just the wind against the glass." "This building creaks," another voice replied. Elisa and Leo lay flat on the concrete slab beneath the raised flooring, surrounded by bundles of fiber-optic cables. Dust filled Elisa's nose. She held her breath, clutching the Echo 3 recorder to her chest like a lifeline. A flashlight beam swept across the server room above them, the light cutting through the grate in the floor tiles, missing Elisa's face by inches. "Clear," the guard said. "Let's check the break room. I want coffee." The footsteps faded. Elisa let out a shuddering breath. They waited another 10 minutes before crawling out. "Get out through the fire escape on the north side," Leo instructed. "It triggers a silent alarm, but I'll disable the notification to the guard station. Just go." "Thank you, Leo," Elisa said, gripping his arm. "I won't forget this." 20 minutes later, Elisa was back in Sarah's car, soaked to the bone, shivering violently. "Did you get it?" Sarah asked, starting the engine. Elisa pulled the black box from her pocket. "Drive. We need a computer." Back at Sarah's office, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah plugged the Echo 3 into her laptop via a USB cable. The drivers installed slowly. Come on," Elisa muttered. A folder popped up on the screen, hundreds of audio files, time-stamped by date and time. "What date was the hallway incident?" Sarah asked. "Yesterday. But look for the day before, or the morning of." Sarah clicked on a file dated 2 days ago, the morning of the alleged threat to the unborn child. The audio crackled, crystal clear. Mason's voice. "She's not settling, Jess. The lawyer says she wants a forensic audit of the accounts." Jessica's voice. "If she audits, she'll see the transfers to the Cayman account. We go to jail, Mason." Mason. "I know. We need to speed this up. We need to make her look dangerous, unstable." Jessica. "Maybe I should lose the baby?" There was a silence on the recording. Then Mason laughed. Mason. You can't lose what you don't have, babe. You're not even showing. Jessica, I bought a silicone bump online. It arrives tomorrow. Listen, tomorrow at the courthouse, I'm going to provoke her. I'll make sure the bailiffs see it. If she touches me, even a little, we scream assault. We claim stress caused a miscarriage. The judge will bury her. Mason, God, you're wicked. I love it. Make sure you cry. You're good at crying. Jessica, watch me. I'll have an Oscar by noon. Sarah paused the recording. The room was silent. Elisa let out a sob, covering her mouth. It wasn't a sob of sadness. It was the sound of a heavy chain breaking. We have them, Sarah said, a terrifying grin spreading across her face. We have them cold. Wait, Elisa said, wiping her eyes. Don't release it yet. Don't send it to their lawyers. Why not? This clears you instantly. Elisa's face hardened. The fear was gone. In its place was the cold, calculated precision of an architect who had found the structural flaw in a building and was preparing to bring the whole thing down. Because they humiliated me in public, Elisa said softly. They made me pass out in front of my peers. I don't want a settlement, Sarah. I want a spectacle. We save this for court. Judge Harrison hates surprises, Sarah warned. Judge Harrison hates liars more, Elisa countered. Let them think they've won. Let Jessica smile one last time. Friday morning arrived with the weight of a funeral. The sky outside the King County Superior Court was a bruised purple, threatening another storm. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was suffocating. The gallery was packed. Local reporters, whispered to have been tipped off by Mason's PR team, sat in the back row with their notepads ready. They were there to witness the final destruction of Elisa Vance. Elisa sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded in her lap. She wore the same black suit, but today she wore her glasses. To the outside world, she looked defeated, a woman resigned to her fate. Across the aisle, Mason and Jessica looked like royalty. Mason was whispering into the ear of his expensive defense attorney, a man named Richard Sterling, who was famous for getting drunk drivers off on technicalities. Jessica was dressed in a soft, pastel cardigan, clutching a tissue, looking every bit the fragile victim. All rise, the bailiff boomed. Judge Harrison swept in. He was a stern man in his 60s, known for his zero-tolerance policy on courtroom theatrics. He adjusted his glasses and peered down at the assembly. We are here for the emergency motion regarding the assets of the Vance estate and the protection order against Mrs. Elisa Vance, Judge Harrison said, his voice gravelly. Mr. Sterling, you may proceed. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, the facts are simple. My client, Mr. Vance, is the victim of a vindictive, unstable spouse who cannot accept that her marriage is over. Mrs. Vance has not only threatened the new partner of Mr. Vance, but physically assaulted her in the halls of this very courthouse. We are asking for full control of the company to be transferred to Mr. Vance immediately to prevent Mrs. Vance from sabotaging the business in her manic state. Call your witness, the judge said. I call Jessica Thorne to the stand. Jessica walked to the stand as if she were walking on broken glass. She took the oath, her voice trembling just the right amount. Ms. Thorne, Sterling began softly, tell the court what happened 3 days ago. Jessica sniffed, wiping a non-existent tear. I was just walking to the elevator. Elisa, Mrs. Vance, she came out of nowhere. She was screaming that I ruined her life. She looked at my stomach and she said she would fix the problem. Then she lunged at me. A gasp went through the gallery. Elisa sat perfectly still, her face a mask of stone. And how has this affected you? Sterling asked. Jessica looked down, her shoulders shaking. I haven't slept. I'm terrified. The doctor says the stress it's dangerous for the baby. I just want to be safe. I just want her to leave us alone." "Thank you, Ms. Thorne," Sterling said, shooting a triumphant look at Elisa's table. "Your witness." Sarah Miller stood up. She didn't walk to the podium. She stood behind her desk, looking bored. "Ms. Thorne," Sarah said, her voice monotone, "you claim you are pregnant, correct?" "Objection," Sterling barked. "Relevance and sensitivity." "It goes to the nature of the alleged threat, Your Honor," Sarah said calmly. "Overruled. Answer the question." Judge Harrison grunted. "Yes," Jessica said, glaring at Sarah. "I am." "And you claim my client threatened your unborn child?" "Yes, she screamed it." "And you have medical records to prove this pregnancy?" Jessica hesitated for a fraction of a second. I haven't had my first scan yet. It's very early. But I have taken home tests." "I see," Sarah said. She picked up a piece of paper. "No further questions for this witness, but I would like to call Mr. Mason Vance to the stand." Mason adjusted his tie as he walked past Elisa. He didn't look at her. He sat in the witness box, exuding the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. "Mr. Vance," Sarah began, "you filed an affidavit stating that Eliza Vance is financially irresponsible, and that is why you need control of the company accounts. Is that correct?" "It is," Mason said smoothly. "Elisa has been checking out. She's missed meetings. The finances are a mess. I'm the CFO. I'm trying to save the company." "So there are no irregularities in the accounts? No funds being moved that shouldn't be?" Mason smiled, a condescending tilt of his head. "The only irregularities are the ones Elisa causes by not signing checks. My books are impeccable. So you have not, for instance, transferred any company funds to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands?" The room went silent. Mason's smile faltered. His eyes darted to his lawyer. "Absolutely not. That's absurd." "You are under oath, Mr. Vance," Judge Harrison warned, leaning forward. "I am aware, Your Honor," Mason said, his voice hardening. "I have never moved money to the Caymans. My wife is delusional. This is just another one of her paranoid fantasies." Sarah nodded slowly. She looked down at her notes, then up at the judge. "Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice changing. The boredom was gone. In its place was a sharp, predatory intensity. "I have no further questions for the witness. However, I would like to introduce a piece of evidence that has just come into our possession. We'll call it Exhibit C." "Objection," Sterling jumped up. "This is a surprise exhibit. We haven't seen it." "It is rebuttal evidence, Your Honor," Sarah said smoothly. "Directly impeaching the testimony of both witnesses we just heard. It proves perjury." Judge Harrison looked at Mason, who was now sweating under the collar, and then at Jessica, who had stopped crying. "I'll allow it," the judge said. "Proceed." Sarah Miller reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small black device. She also pulled out a USB drive, which she handed to the court clerk. "This," Sarah said, holding up the black box, "is an Echo 3 acoustic diagnostic unit. It is a device invented by Elisa Vance to monitor structural vibrations. It was installed in the ceiling of Mr. Vance's office 3 months ago to diagnose an HVAC issue." Mason's face went white, a sickly, ghostly white. He gripped the railing of the witness stand so hard his knuckles turned yellow. "The device is voice-activated," Sarah continued, her voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "And it was recording on the morning of Tuesday the 14th, the day before the alleged assault." Jessica, sitting in the front row behind the defense table, froze. The smirk she had been wearing, the one she had flashed at Elisa just minutes ago, began to twitch. "Please play the file titled AUR9, 14 a.m., Sarah instructed the clerk. The speakers in the courtroom crackled. The static hiss filled the room for a second, and then voices filled the air. Clear. Undeniable. High definition. Mason's voice. "She's not settling, Jess. The lawyer says she wants a forensic audit of the accounts." The gallery murmured. Mason closed his eyes on the stand. Jessica's voice. "If she audits, she'll see the transfers to the Cayman account. We go to jail, Mason." Judge Harrison's head snapped toward Mason. The judge's expression darkened from neutral to furious. Mason's voice. "I know. We need to speed this up. We need to make her look dangerous, unstable." Jessica's voice. "Maybe I should lose the baby." The murmurs in the gallery turned into gasps. Jessica Thorne stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Turn it off. That's fake. That's AI." "Sit down!" Judge Harrison roared, slamming his gavel. "Sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." Jessica collapsed back into her chair, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The recording continued. Mason's voice. "You can't lose what you don't have, babe. You're not even showing." Jessica's voice. "I bought a silicone bump online. It arrives tomorrow." At this, Elisa looked up. She looked directly at Jessica. Jessica wasn't smiling anymore. Her mouth was open in a silent scream of panic. Her hands were instinctively covering her stomach, the stomach that the audio just proved was flat. The recording played on, mercilessly delivering the final blow. Jessica's voice. "Listen, tomorrow at the courthouse, I'm going to provoke her. If she touches me, even a little, we scream assault. The judge will bury her." Mason's voice. "God, you're wicked. I love it." Sarah signaled the clerk to cut the audio. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of a bomb having just detonated, with the dust settling over the ruins of 2 lives. Judge Harrison slowly took off his glasses. He placed them on his desk. He looked at Mason, who was slumped in the witness box, looking like a man facing a firing squad. Then he looked at Jessica, who was weeping. Real, ugly tears of terror this time. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you have any explanation for why your clients just admitted to conspiracy, fraud, perjury, and filing a false police report in my courtroom?" Sterling, the high-priced lawyer, was already packing his briefcase. He stood up, creating distance between himself and Mason. "Your Honor, I would like to request a recess to consult with my clients regarding criminal liability. I was not made aware of these facts." "Denied," Judge Harrison barked. "Bailiff, lock the doors." Mason stood up. "Judge, please, that recording is out of context. It was a joke. We were role-playing." "Role-playing?" Elisa spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, cutting through the chaos. She stood up slowly. "Is the Cayman account role-play too, Mason? Because I have the bank routing numbers." She held up a folder. Mason looked at Elisa. For the first time in their marriage, he looked at her with genuine fear. He realized, too late, that he hadn't married a passive interior decorator. He had married a titan. "You set me up," Mason whispered. "No, Mason," Elisa said, her eyes cold. "You set yourself up. I just turned on the lights." Judge Harrison turned to the bailiff. "Take Mr. Vance into custody immediately, and Miss Thorne as well. I want them charged with perjury and obstruction of justice, and I want the district attorney on the phone regarding the fraud admissions." "No!" Jessica screamed as a bailiff approached her. She scrambled back, knocking over a pitcher of water. "I'm pregnant. You can't arrest me. I'm pregnant." "Ms. Thorne," Judge Harrison said, his voice dripping with disgust, Unless you want a court-ordered medical examination right now, I suggest you drop the act. The recording was quite clear. As the bailiffs handcuffed Mason, he didn't struggle. He just stared at the floor, his legacy in ashes. But Jessica fought. She flailed, screaming, her angelic white dress knocking against the tables. As she was dragged past Elisa, she wasn't smiling. She wasn't winking. She looked like a trapped animal. Elisa watched them go. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply took a deep breath, inhaling the air of a room that was finally, truly, hers again. The judge turned to Elisa. Mrs. Vance, the restraining order is vacated immediately. The motion for asset control is denied with prejudice. And frankly, if you want to file for sole ownership of the company based on this evidence of embezzlement, I will sign the order before lunch. Elisa looked at Sarah, who gave her a small, sharp nod. Thank you, Your Honor, Elisa said. I'll take it all. The moment Judge Harrison's gavel fell, signaling the arrest of Mason Vance and Jessica Thorne, the atmosphere around Elisa Vance shifted instantaneously. It was no longer a fight for survival, but a coronation of justice. Sarah Miller, Elisa's attorney, seized control of the situation with the practiced ease of a veteran commander. She threw a dismissive arm around Elisa's shoulders, shielding her from the sudden, aggressive surge of reporters. No comment, people! Step aside! This is harassment! As they navigated the packed hallway toward a side exit, Elisa felt a strange combination of physical weakness and profound, almost terrifying clarity. The adrenaline that had propelled her through the dark night of the break-in, the dizzying climb to the 20th floor, and the tense courtroom drama now began to recede, leaving her unsteady. I need air, Sarah, Elisa whispered, clutching her arm. Her black suit, a uniform of professional defiance, suddenly felt heavy and hot. Almost there, Sarah murmured, practically steering Elisa through a service door usually reserved for custodial staff. They spilled out into a rainy alleyway behind the courthouse, where Sarah's driver was already waiting, engine idling. Once inside the black sedan, the tinted windows provided a shield from the flash of cameras still staking out the main entrance. Elisa leaned back, closing her eyes. She felt the vibrations of the engine, the familiar scent of leather, and the slow, rhythmic pound of her own exhausted heart. You did it, Elisa, Sarah said, her voice filled with a rare, genuine admiration. She pulled out her phone. The district attorney is already drafting warrants for perjury, conspiracy to defraud, and grand larceny. Mason's bail will be high, astronomical, considering the risk of flight and the Cayman account evidence. He's not getting out tonight. Jessica, too. They're being held? Elisa asked, opening her eyes. Separately. Mason's lawyers are trying to argue temporary insanity caused by the divorce stress. Jessica's public defender is arguing she was coerced. Neither story will stick. The recording is a confession of conspiracy. Sarah paused, her smile predatory. They are already turning on each other, Elle. We don't have to do anything but watch them implode. Elisa didn't smile back. I want the money back, Sarah. Every cent of company funds he funneled offshore, and I want the company back. Clean. It's already in motion. I've sent the transcripts of Exhibit C to every member of the Vance Architecture Board of Directors, along with the proof of the Cayman transfers and the police reports Mason filed against you. The emergency meeting to remove Mason as Chief Financial Officer and CEO is scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. It's a formality. He's gone. You're back. 2 days later, Elisa stood alone in the master bedroom of the house she had shared with Mason for 10 years, the magnificent, custom-designed home overlooking the Puget Sound. The house felt hollow, eerily silent. Mason's absence was a palpable, immediate void, The professional movers Sarah had hired had efficiently stripped the rooms of every trace of Mason's possessions: his expensive bespoke suits, his golf clubs, his massive collection of first-edition crime novels. They even took the hideous, oversized abstract painting he insisted on hanging in the dining room. But the house still carried the residual energy of betrayal. Elisa walked slowly into the walk-in closet. Her side was orderly, filled with her classic, tailored wardrobe. Mason's side was now a huge, empty expanse. That's when she saw it. A tiny, glittering silver earring, a cheap piece of costume jewelry lodged in the carpet fibers near the shoe rack. It was the kind of flashy, unsophisticated accessory Jessica Thorne favored. Elisa crouched down, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. This small, vulgar piece of metal was proof that Jessica hadn't just occupied Mason's office. She had occupied Elisa's home, her bed, her life. The realization sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. She didn't discard the earring. Instead, she dropped it into a small velvet jewelry box she kept on her dresser, a reminder of the filth she had to clean out. She called the painter and the cleaning crew. "I want every surface scrubbed," she instructed the lead cleaner. "I want the carpets professionally steam cleaned, and then I want the entire master suite repainted. I don't want a single molecule of the air they breathed left in this room." Her next call was to the landscaping company. "Remove the oak Mason planted on the south lawn," she ordered, "and replace it with 3 dogwood trees. They bloom pink and white." The process wasn't about revenge, it was about exorcism. Elisa realized she couldn't heal until every part of the environment Mason had poisoned was cleansed and reclaimed by her own unique vision. Later that afternoon, Leo, the loyal head of IT, arrived. He was still jumpy, but exhilarated by the role he had played. He was there to reinstall the full security infrastructure, now with Elisa's biometric data as the only master key. "We found the other stuff, Elisa," Leo said, setting a small, heavy box on the kitchen counter. The forensic team Sarah hired recovered this from Mason's Four Seasons suite. The company credit card records led them right to it. Elisa opened the box. Inside were several items that documented the depths of the conspiracy. 1. A small bundle of keys to a safety deposit box in Toronto, and a small, secluded post office box in Vancouver. More evidence of clandestine planning. 2. Foreign currency. Several stacks of unmarked euros and a significant amount of Canadian dollars. 3. The silicone bump. Finally, the most grotesque item. A sealed zip-top bag containing a perfectly sculpted piece of silicone, slightly curved, designed to look like an early-stage baby bump. It was the prop Jessica had used to garner sympathy and fuel the lie that nearly destroyed Elisa. Elisa stared at the prop pregnancy belly. It wasn't just the lie that was shocking. It was the calculated, chilling level of preparation. They weren't just careless lovers. They were sophisticated conspirators, fully intending to use the power of the law and public sympathy to steal her company and her freedom. "This is going straight to Sarah," Elisa said, her voice steady. "It proves malicious intent and premeditation. It will bury them deeper in the fraud charges." "And Jessica's fate, Elisa?" Leo asked gently. "She chose her fate, Leo. She was a voluntary participant in a financial crime and a character assassination. She could have walked away. Instead, she chose to smile at me while I was on the floor." Elisa closed the box. "Justice isn't about vengeance, Leo. It's about letting the consequences of their choices run their natural course." The next morning, Elisa walked back into the Vance Architecture building. She didn't use the back service door this time. She walked straight through the main entrance, past the bewildered, whispering receptionist, and into the elevator. When she reached the 20th floor, The atmosphere was electric. The silence was respectful, not hostile. Leo had worked all night. The massive brass plaque with Vance Architecture was gone. The new temporary sign was simple, metallic, and modern. Vance and Associates. The board meeting was quick and unanimous. Mason Vance was stripped of all titles and privileges. Elisa was confirmed as the sole CEO and chairwoman of the board. "The embezzlement is massive," Elisa announced to the remaining senior staff and board members, standing at the head of the long conference table. Mason systematically diverted approximately $18 million over 2 years to the Cayman Islands. We will cooperate fully with federal and international investigators to claw back every penny. This company will endure a temporary financial shock, but we will not fail. We will not sell out to Apex Corp. She looked around the room, making eye contact with every person. "This is the culture shift," Elisa stated. "From this moment forward, integrity is our primary product. I want the word Vance to stand for accountability, transparency, and architectural excellence. We are going to implement a full internal and external audit system. We are going to promote the people who stayed loyal. Leo, you're the new director of security and IT, with a seat at this table." Leo, shocked and thrilled, nodded, blushing under his bright pink hair. "And finally," Elisa concluded, her voice softening slightly, but maintaining its strength, "for the staff who were loyal, who were tormented by Mason and Jessica, I want you to know, you are safe. This is not a monarchy. It is a collaborative firm. We are building the future, not just with steel and glass, but with honest contracts and clean hands." Weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Due to the conclusive evidence of criminal financial misconduct, fraud, and cruelty, Mason received nothing. Elisa retained 100% of the marital assets, the company, the house, and the entire retirement portfolio. Mason was left facing years in federal prison and crippling legal fees. Elisa sat in her newly repainted, clean master bedroom. The 3 dogwood trees were thriving on the south lawn. The scent of pine and fresh cedar replaced the ghost of cheap perfume. She picked up the small black Echo 3 recorder from her nightstand. It was just a device, a piece of plastic and metal. But in the grand design of her life, it had been the cornerstone of her defense, the foundation for her rebuild. She thought about Mason and Jessica. They had tried to paint her as unstable, as hysterical, as the woman who passed out in court. But the truth was, her fragility was temporary. Their deceit was permanent. They had been exposed not by a dramatic witness or a lucky break, but by their own overconfidence, their failure to realize that the architect knew every single corner and cavity of the world she had built. Elisa walked to her office, the one she had originally designed for herself, adjacent to Mason's former suite. She sat at her drafting table, the tools of her trade spread out around her. She picked up a pencil, the sharp graphite point ready to create something new, something real. A single quiet tear traced a line down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sorrow. It was the final, cleansing tear for the decade of delusion and misplaced trust. She was free. She was strong. The company was thriving under her sole command, having shed the corrupt deadweight. Elisa Vance was more than just a survivor. She was the one who engineered her own justice. She was ready to build, and there it is, friends. The silence that followed that recording was the silence of pure, unadulterated justice. Jessica Thorne, who had planned every single detail of her attack, from the fake pregnancy bump to the perfect smirk, walked out of that courtroom in handcuffs, her wicked smile replaced by the terror of a woman whose deepest secrets were exposed by a forgotten piece of technology. Mason Vance, the ambitious CFO, learned that arrogance is the fastest way to ruin. Elisa Vance lost a husband, but she regained her company, her reputation, and her self-respect. The biggest lesson here? Trust your gut, but always, always read the fine print. And sometimes, the most silent witness is the most powerful. If this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate vindication gave you chills, then hit the like button right now. Which part of the recording stunned you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into real-life courtroom dramas. Until next time, stay sharp and always keep an ear out for the truth.